Alright, it's time to get to work on this Kabuto Kai again and finish up the interior on this really cool looking model. Hey, I'm John. Thanks for joining me for this video. I'm going to be continuing work on this very unusual model. It's part of the Fists of War series from Rocket Models. And if you saw episode 1, you saw the explanation I gave in the beginning of that about what it is. In this one, I'm going to focus on finishing the interior. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm applying an enamel wash. And I'm using this AK enamel wash OIF and IF. I guess they're brothers. Maybe they're from Australia. I'm OIF. I'm IF. That was bad. Anyway, it's a really dirty brown wash. And here on the floor, I'm going to put this on just very heavy because I want this to look really worn and dirty and grimy because obviously whoever the crew is going to be walking around on it. And it's going to get very dirty. We're still going to do some more stuff on that. But it's going to get very dirty and dusty and all sorts of other things. Now something, and this has nothing to do with the Kabuto Kai, but I will bring up, when you're using any paints, but especially these enamel washes, if you've ever stirred them up, you probably feel that when you stick the whatever you're using to stir with down at the bottom of them, the pigment really gets settled down in there. Whatever it is that makes them work, pigment, gunk, color, whatever. And I've had people contact me and say they have trouble with enamel washes. They go on glossy, or they go on really super thin, or the color's kind of grainy or whatever. Now in some of those cases, if your color's going on grainy, it could be that the stuff is just getting old. It needs more thinner or something like that. But in a lot of cases, it's just that people aren't stirring it thoroughly enough. And I've become thoroughly convinced that shaking a bottle is just not sufficient. Whether it's with paints or with enamels or anything, like, you see on Warhammer TV, whenever they shake up their paints, they give it, just a few shakes. You can't get it shaken up enough to really work. My suggestion, buy one of these. I mean, I think I've seen them as low as $12. I think they're normally about $15. It doesn't have to be from Badger. Just go ahead and buy one of these. I was telling somebody that, and they said, yeah, but it's kind of expensive to be paying for something like that. And I'm like, you buy a model a week. Just chill on buying a model 1 week. Get a stir stick. It will transform your painting, trust me. Anyway, enough editorializing. I've had 2 cups of coffee this morning, so I'm feeling particularly animated. Whoops. All right, now for applying the enamel washes, this stuff is kind of thick right out of the bottle, but I want that because the thicker wash really concentrates the color. And this is over flat paint. I didn't gloss coat this. I didn't satin coat it. It's just over the flat Tamiya paint. Whatever the paint was is what it is. I have trouble with my hands. They do what I call hiccups. I'll be holding something and suddenly they just do that. And I drop it. It's probably a bad thing, but who wants to go to the doctor right now in this COVID world? Anyway, I'm putting it on just like that, and I'm going to go back later and clean it up. But I want it to be kind of grimy going on so that in the cleanup, I can just spread that around and make some additional staining and stuff like that. So when you're putting on enamels, keep in mind, if you're trying to be neat, let's say you're building a gunpla and you're wanting it to be really neat. Not neat as in cool, but neat as in tidy. It's best to gloss coat it first and then clean up, and clean up very precisely. Whereas on something like this, where I'm wanting it to be dirty, I'm not worried about precise cleanup. And in fact, I want it to be kind of dirty looking. So I'll add this stuff in, and then here in a moment, I keep saying that, I'll go and clean it up. But it's kind of a fun process to do this. But I'll continue doing this, and we'll get to the cleanup. Alright, I've got the wash all over everything. And I'm going to go back and clean it up, and I've just got some odorless thinner here off camera. And I've moistened my brush, and I didn't even damp it off. This is a very wet brush. And all I'm going to do is just go in and just kind of feather those edges like that. And you can be as neat as you want about this to try and get it fairly, tight looking, or you can be fairly loose about it. If you want to be more tight, then you might want to use a cotton bud to really get up the excess. I'm not trying to get up too much of the excess. I'm just trying to feather the edges a little bit to leave some staining. So there's cleaning up is cleaning up, but there's a lot of different ways to do it. And you're going to get the most out of it, in my opinion. If you've not done this before, or you've not done it a lot, you're going to get the most out of it by trying different things. Being afraid to try something because you've got this idea that you'll ruin a model. Let me just be real blunt, and I would only say this on Patreon. Let me be real blunt. If you're afraid to do anything, and you're just kind of, at this stage of base painting, your models may look good. But in terms of, okay, I want to learn to weather a model, well, you're already kind of ruining them anyway, because you're ruining the opportunity to learn from them, if you know what I mean. So, I know that's kind of blunt, but, if you want to weather your models, then you've got to weather your models. You've got to make mistakes to learn from it. Same way, one of the hardest things that I have to try and do is, a challenge for me is clean models. But I've had to eat my own dog food, I guess you'd say, because I know that the only way to learn how to build a really clean model is to build a really clean model and make mistakes along the way and learn from those mistakes. So, like with these washes, if you've never applied them and you're thinking, man, that kind of, intimidates me, well, the only way you're going to get across that gap is to try it. And if it doesn't look optimal the first time, well, that's normal. The expectation, I see this all the time on the social medias, people have the expectation that, well, I've seen someone do it on YouTube once and now I'm going to try it, and I should be an expert after round one. And it just doesn't work that way. So anyway, give it a try. Now you'll note here, and here I am damping my brush just a little bit because I don't want to take it all off. But here I'm spreading it around. I'm trying to bring out a little bit more of that base color. I knew I'd have to do this. I knew when I put it on heavy like that, it was going to cover this area up. But you can see that just cleans it up a little bit. I'll let it dry, and if I want to get a little more cleaned up, I may go back at it with a cotton bud. But the main thing is I want to start laying a base of some distinction between that grid look. But I'm going to continue cleaning up these parts, and we'll move on to more weathering. All right, I've got all the washes in place that I want. Now what I'm going to do is on this floor, and this is just barely dry. I mean, I'm not waiting a long time for this. Maybe 10 minutes. I'm going to take this just stick of graphite. It's basically one giant pencil lead, and I'm just going to run it over those, take the flat edge of it, and I'm just going to run it over those ridges, those little edges in there. Now, at some angles, it's just going to appear to be a dark color, but at other angles, it's going to catch the light and look really metallic, which is exactly what I want to happen for it. And I'm going for complete coverage here. I'm not just going to go for some spots, because this would get worn down. But can you see the shine there, how that looks? I love that. That's cool. And then also on some of the edges, and this is something I saw Martin from Night Shift do. I'm just going to run it along the edges of places like that where it would get scuffed a lot, and it would clean it, so to speak. You know, you can have a surface that's rusty, of course, or grimy, but if it's being walked on or handled a lot, that constant handling and griminess and all of that is going to kind of, I guess you'd say, clean it up. So you see how that ends up. And that was real quick and easy. That's not a, you know, I love techniques like this because they're essentially foolproof, in that when you see I'm just rubbing a pencil on it, it's easy enough. And I can go in and do it on other edges like this. And it just gives it just a bit of metallic shine when you're looking at it in one light. But if not, it just gives it a dark, you know, chipped look. And you can even use it for chips and stuff like that. I mean, there's nothing that says you can't do that. So these graphite, and I've just picked this up at a local art supply store. There's, you know, I like the HB kind. I don't know what HB means, other than apparently that's the grade of lead that it is. And then to sand it or to sharpen it, I just use a sanding stick. It's also a great way to get some really good graphite rubbing powder. And if you see where I got a little extra, I don't know if it'll show up, where the pencil got right along there, this stuff can actually be cleaned up with odorless thinner. You have to be careful about that. If you put this on and then try and put some enamel washes over it, it's going to wash away pretty much all of it. So be aware of that. But a pencil like this is a great tool to have. A complement to it, let me see if I can spot it real quick. It's a mechanical pencil. Uses the same kind of lead, but gives you a very precise tip for making chips or getting into areas that are a little more difficult. So that's another handy tool to have around. But let me go ahead and get some of these things edged and shiny-fied with my pencil here, and we'll move on. Okay, I'm happy with the way the washes and everything is looking, and adding in some of that graphite to chip things up a bit. I think it does what I want it to do, which is make it look like a used military vehicle. So the next step I'm going to take is to add in some dust and dirt stains. You know, if you've, I get those in my car. You know, I remember, and I don't go out in the field. I mean, I just walk from my house to my driveway and drive into work and get out in the parking lot, and there's still dust and dirt that gets in there from time to time. And I remember my Humvee when I was in the Army that my team was assigned. I mean, we could wash that thing out and it still just seemed to just produce its own dust and dirt on the inside, let alone the outside. So what I'm going to do, just to keep it simple, is I'm going to use these Tamiya powders. I'm normally not a real big fan of using pigments myself. I mean, I use them, but quite often they just don't stick without something else on them. And when you put something over them, it will often make them look different. The thing I like about Tamiya weathering powders, though, is they're kind of sticky. They really are. I showed them to my wife one time, and I'm like, are these just repurposed, you know, makeup thingy dealies that, you know, women put on their eyes or face or whatever? And she was looking at the consistency and she said, it kind of seems that way. But, I mean, they're not completely permanent, but because it's going to be inside this interior, and I don't think anybody's going to be, sticking their finger down around in it, wiping things up. What I'm going to do is just take some of this. Which color is this? This is the light sand. And I'm using this just because it'll give a little bit of contrast to the other things. And I'm just going to go in and just in different places, just kind of poke that around. I don't want to cover everything. It'd be helpful if I was on camera. I don't want to cover everything, but I just want to give the hint in amongst that grid work of some sand, some dust, some dirt. I mean, it may be mistaken for the base color because the base color is basically dust colored, but hopefully this will sell the notion of some dirt if somebody's looking in and they're, taking a little more than just a cursory glance at the inside. And it'll stick down inside there fairly well. Now, if you get more than you want in an area, you can bear down on it and kind of blend it around a little bit. But I'm just going to apply that in those areas. And then I also want to do the same kind of here along some of the sides and just suggest some dirt and dust just to give some lighter tones along there. And you see there's not a huge amount of contrast going on there. I may not be doing myself much good by putting this on here. Yeah, it's starting to build up. Okay, I can see that. I like that. So I'll just continue adding this in around on the interior on selected places just to give the notion. There's the morning train. I don't know if you can hear that. Just to give the notion of some dust and dirt there on the inside. I also want to add some rust tones in a few places, and I'm going to use this strong ochre pencil from AK to do that. And I do that because it's just quick and simple. I don't want to have a lot of rust, but just a few places. So what I do is I go in and I just kind of draw that in right there along these little things like that. And it really is just as easy as penciling it in. That's one of the reasons I like these. And then I just get a very small pointy brush and I wet it just in my paint cleaning water. And then I just kind of come in and streak those down like that. In a way, they work kind of like oils in that you can blend them. If you want to clean any excess up like that, you just do that. You just kind of draw them down and just blend them in until you get them like you want. And it leaves a pretty nice little rust stain. You get something that goes awry like that, get your cotton bud, just clean it. In fact, you could probably just use your cotton bud like that. Not be quite so fancy as using a brush. But you see, it's very flexible. And if you need to, you can pretty much clean up all of it with water and start over if you don't like where it's headed. But I'll just work these in and do some rust stains around on the interior. And while I'm doing that, I'll think of what I want to do next. All right, I've got the rust stains on and I'm happy with them. And I think I'm at the point that I'm ready to break out the instructions once again and get this guy assembled. I won't show this on video because it's just assembling the thing, but I will get it together and then come back and show you what it looks like, tell you any problems I had, and then do any final adjustments on the interior. All right, I've run into a minor problem here. These little boxes are hollow in the back, and they go in places like this. Now, when the lid is popped up, you'll be able to see the back of those boxes. Now, if I was just gluing it closed, it wouldn't matter. Nobody would see that. But that little gap there, I think, just looks kind of bad. And these are going to go, one's going to go here, and one's going to go back here. And especially in the case of this one, you'll be able to see the back of that when the top is popped up. So what I'm going to do is a real simple fix. I get some plastic card like this, and I'm going to set them on it. And I'm just going to glue them directly to the card like that with my Tamiya extra thin cement. Push it down a little bit, turn it around, get it all the way around. Make sure that it's good and glued in there. Just like this. This is why I love Tamiya extra thin. It solves a lot of problems. I'm going to mush that down real hard. Now, I've got to head off to work for the day, so I'm going to let that sit there, and I'm going to glue these other two on. Let that sit there and dry, and then when I get home, I'll trim that off, paint and weather the back of it. Problem solved. And there, I'll just let them sit happily there all day, dry up, and then this evening I'll come in and clip everything off. I love simple fixes like that. All right, for you it's been about 1 second. For me it's been all day. But I'm going to come in here, I split these apart, I'm just going to come in here with my scissors. I'm just going to trim that fairly close. I'm not worrying about being perfect at this point. I could use a knife for this, but this is just so quick that I always go for the scissors. And now I'll just grab my hobby knife and I'll simply carve the rest away, trying not to carve into the actual part itself. One quick note. Yeah, it would have been easier to do this before I painted everything, but you work with what you got. All right, it's finished. Mostly. The reason I say mostly is I still have to glue these on. Right now it's just set in place. I have to glue these on. I have to glue this part on. It's just set in place. And then I have to put the whole gun mount up on there, particularly this central piece right here. And I realized that I really can't set this in place proper, nor this in place, until I get that central piece that goes over here ready to go. So I think I'm going to save that for the next episode. I'm planning for the next episode to essentially build, this is from the end of the instructions, but to essentially build this central piece here, the guns, and maybe get started on the legs. We'll see. But I'm happy with the way the interior looks. Let me take out these parts that aren't glued on. The way this is supposed to work is once this is glued in place, theoretically, you'll be able to lift that up and look in the interior. This is a bit wonky. It's a two-part section. It's got some pegs that come off of here, and I'm worried about the plastic getting strained. I'm not sure how I'm going to proceed with this. I've thought about replacing the plastic rod that holds that together, that makes this pivot happen. I've thought about replacing that with metal. I've even thought about just adding a couple of magnets. Maybe a little late to hide those, but you know, maybe trying to figure out a way to magnetize it, or even just disconnecting that and just setting it in place and asking the eventual buyer, do you want this piece glued on, or do you want to be able to take it on and off and look at the inside? I'm not sure yet, but I'm happy with the interior. To me, it looks like a piece of used military equipment. And that's what I was going for. There's still a hatch that I've got to put in down here. I'll do that when I do the externals. But I'm happy with that. I like the little bit of shine that appears when you move it around in the light down on that grid stuff down here. It looks like it's worn. As I'm looking at it now, I probably need to go in and do a little more up here of that, but I can do that later. But I just like the way it looks. I like the parts they put in go in fairly easily. They look pretty good. The backing that I put on to that piece right here, that worked out really well. I'm real happy with how that turned out. It just looks like it was made to be that way, so that's good. I realized after I went to the trouble of doing this one and this one with the same backing that only this one piece right here would be seen, but oh well, it was practice. But anyway, this is a fun kit just to put together the interior. I mean, I'm looking forward to the rest of it, but the interior is a lot of fun. So I would definitely recommend, if you're looking for something very different but still feeling familiar in terms of, okay, it's a 1/35th scale armor kit, this is definitely one to look at. Well, thank you so much for being a patron. This is a Patreon exclusive video, and I am so very grateful for the enthusiast and fanatic supporters who will see this. So thank you very much for your support. I know I sound like a broken record when I say it all the time in the public videos and even in these, but it really does make what I do possible. I don't know any other way to state it. I'm just humbled by the fact that all of you would come alongside us and help us out, because it really does. It not only benefits just this YouTube work that I do, and the website and the things that I do in terms of modeling, but it really is a great benefit to my family, and I am very grateful for that. So thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope, and if it's not giving you anything new that you can try, or maybe a refinement on something you've already done, maybe it's at least entertained you, or at the very least showed you some things not to do. So I hope it's been useful in that way. But thank you very much for being a patron. And finally, as I'll always say, in this hobby, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.